For 2 centuries, the United States has shaped the destinies of Latin America and the Caribbean through the powerful and controversial idea of the Monroe Doctrine. This doctrine, more than just a policy, became a defining feature of American foreign relations in the Western Hemisphere, influencing generations of leaders and shaping the region's political landscape. First declared in 1823 by President James Monroe, it boldly warned European powers against further colonization or interference in the Americas. This statement positioned the United States as the self-appointed guardian of the hemisphere, asserting a new sense of American identity and responsibility. The doctrine was both a shield against Old World empires and a declaration of a new world order, with the U.S. at its center. Over time, the Monroe Doctrine evolved from a defensive policy into a justification for intervention. The United States used it to legitimize military occupations, political meddling, and economic coercion throughout Latin America. These actions left deep scars of mistrust and resentment, as entire nations experienced the consequences of U.S. involvement in their internal affairs. The doctrine's legacy became intertwined with stories of upheaval, resistance, and the struggle for true independence. Even as official policies softened in the later 20th century, the underlying assumption of American preeminence persisted. During the Cold War, the U.S. prioritized its own security and interests over the sovereignty of its neighbors, often supporting coups or covert operations to maintain influence. The Monroe Doctrine's spirit endured, shaping the region's politics and fueling ongoing debates about autonomy and intervention. These interventions are not just distant history, they continue to shape today's political realities and the suspicion with which many in Latin America view Washington. Protests, political movements, and public opinion across the region still reflect the long shadow cast by the Monroe Doctrine as countries seek to assert their independence and redefine their relationship with the United States. The Monroe Doctrine's principles have never truly vanished. They lie dormant, ready to resurface whenever a leader seeks to reassert American power or influence. Its legacy is a reminder of the complex, often fraught relationship between the U.S. and its southern neighbors, a relationship marked by both cooperation and conflict, hope and suspicion. Now, as the world changes and new global powers emerge, the stage is set for a new, potentially volatile chapter in hemispheric relations. The enduring legacy of the Monroe Doctrine continues to influence the present, reminding us that history is never truly past. It lives on in the choices and challenges of today. President Trump's second term has revived and radically reinterpreted the Monroe Doctrine, now dubbed the Monroe Doctrine. The 2025 National Security Strategy openly commits to enforcing U.S. dominance in the hemisphere, shifting from partnership to unilateral intervention. The doctrine's goals: counter China's influence, halt migration, combat drugs, and secure economic advantages, all under the banner of America First. This is not just about keeping rivals out. It's about projecting U.S. power through military threats, economic pressure, and political interference. The Monroe Doctrine dismisses equal partnership, re-establishing a clear hierarchy with the U.S. at the top. It's the Monroe Doctrine reimagined, more aggressive, transactional, and focused on American supremacy. The Monroe Doctrine is now enforced not just by words, but by a dramatic and highly visible show of U.S. military force, especially throughout the Caribbean basin. The presence of American warships and aircraft in these waters is a constant reminder of U.S. resolve, signaling to both friends and foes that the United States is prepared to defend its interests at any cost. This military buildup is not just for deterrence, it's a message, broadcast to the world, that the U.S. is willing to act decisively. American warships now patrol off the coast of Venezuela, intercepting and seizing oil tankers suspected of violating sanctions, while military drones fly overhead, gathering intelligence and, at times, launching precision strikes. These actions are clear signals that the use of force is not just a threat, but a real and present option. The region has become a stage for high-stakes maneuvers, with every move scrutinized by the international community. President Trump has escalated rhetoric, openly threatening military action against Mexico in response to border tensions, and even floating the idea of annexing Canada or seizing Greenland. These provocative statements have stoked anxiety across the region, leaving neighboring countries uncertain about America's intentions and the stability of long-standing alliances. The unpredictability of U.S. policy has made diplomatic relations more fragile than ever. Counter-narcotics operations have intensified dramatically, with traffickers now labeled as terrorists. This new designation has justified the use of lethal force, leading to a surge in military raids and maritime interceptions. However, these aggressive tactics have drawn sharp criticism from human rights organizations, who warn that the line between law enforcement and warfare is becoming dangerously blurred. This revival of gunboat diplomacy is designed to intimidate not only regional actors, but also global rivals like China and Russia, who are increasingly active in the hemisphere. The presence of U.S. naval power near foreign harbors sends a clear warning. Any challenge to American dominance will be met with overwhelming force. The stakes are higher than ever, as great power competition returns to the Americas. But the risks of this approach are immense, alienating traditional allies, provoking adversaries into dangerous confrontations, and increasing the likelihood of accidental or intentional conflict. Tensions are rising, and diplomatic channels are strained as leaders struggle to navigate this new reality. The big stick may project strength and resolve, but it also threatens to destabilize the entire region, replacing careful diplomacy with the ever-present threat of military intervention. Civil society groups and international organizations warn that peace is more fragile than it has been in decades. As uncertainty and fear spread across the hemisphere, ordinary people are left to wonder what the future holds. The shadow of conflict looms large, and the promise of stability seems more distant than ever before. Economic power is the Trump administration's other main weapon. Tariffs and sanctions target even close allies, with trade deals like USMCA used as leverage for U.S. demands. In Argentina, a $40 billion bailout was tied to the far right's electoral success, directly shaping another nation's politics. But in Brazil, sanctions and tariffs failed to protect Bolsonaro, backfiring and boosting President Lula's popularity. The U.S. pardoned Honduras's ex-president for drug crimes, while sanctioning Colombia's leader, revealing contradictions in policy. This transactional approach creates volatility, forcing nations to navigate a landscape of threats and inducements. Allies are left uncertain, never sure when they'll be targeted or rewarded. The weaponization of economic policy has made the region more unpredictable than ever. Nowhere is the U.S.-China rivalry clearer than at the Panama Canal. Chinese firms managed key ports, alarming Washington and prompting a U.S.-led bid to reclaim control. President Trump's public outcry led to a BlackRock consortium's attempt to buy out the Chinese stake. Beijing countered, demanding its own state-owned company, Costco, be included in the deal. This move turned a U.S. win into a complex entanglement, preserving China's foothold and expanding its global reach. The standoff at the canal is a high-stakes chess match, illustrating the risks of Trump's confrontational approach. The battle for the canal is a microcosm of the new Cold War in America's backyard. The Monroe Doctrine's core mission is to confront China's meteoric rise in Latin America. China is now the region's largest trading partner, financing infrastructure and forging deep economic ties. Beijing's diplomatic and military outreach has shifted alliances, with several nations switching recognition from Taiwan to China. The Trump administration sees this as strategic encroachment, not benign trade, and responds with aggressive countermeasures. Every U.S. action, from sanctions to pressure at the Panama Canal, is filtered through the lens of great power competition. The goal forced nations to choose between Washington and Beijing, making Chinese partnership too costly. It's a high-risk strategy that seeks to dismantle China's influence, but could backfire if not carefully managed. The Monroe Doctrine's real-world results are mixed. In Argentina, U.S. leverage worked. A bailout tied to the far right's victory delivered a friendly government, hailed as a win in Washington. Critics saw it as blatant interference, a modern form of economic colonialism. Emboldened, the administration tried similar tactics in Brazil, aiming to shield Bolsonaro from prosecution. Instead, U.S. pressure sparked nationalist backlash, strengthened President Lula, and led to Bolsonaro's conviction. The U.S. was forced to retreat, lifting tariffs and exposing the limits of its approach. Brazil's resistance showed that not all nations are equally vulnerable to American pressure. The doctrine's one-size-fits-all strategy faces real obstacles in a diverse region. The Monroe Doctrine has triggered a wave of anxiety and recalibration across the Americas and far beyond. Governments, analysts, and citizens alike are grappling with the implications of this bold new policy, which has upended established norms and alliances throughout the region. Latin America's long and complicated history with U.S. intervention fuels deep apprehension, pushing some nations to seek closer ties with China as a counterbalance. For many leaders, China now represents not just an economic partner, but a potential shield against U.S. pressure and influence. The threat of U.S. military action, especially against Venezuela, risks not only a regional backlash, but also the eruption of a massive refugee crisis. Neighboring countries brace for the possibility of tens of thousands fleeing violence or instability, straining already fragile social systems. Traditional allies like Canada and Europe are alarmed by Washington's aggressive stance. Canada finds itself sidelined in key discussions, while Europe openly rebuffs U.S. accusations and begins to seek new partnerships, wary of being drawn into a confrontation not of their making. The growing rift with allies weakens any hope of a united front against China and further stalls regional cooperation. Diplomatic channels that once fostered consensus now echo with mistrust and uncertainty. A long-awaited EU-Mercosur trade deal has collapsed, removing what many saw as a crucial counterweight to both U.S. and Chinese influence in the region. The failure of this agreement leaves Latin America more exposed and less able to chart its own course. Latin American nations now face fewer options, caught between assertive superpowers and their own fractured unity. Internal divisions make it difficult to present a common front, leaving smaller countries especially vulnerable to outside pressure. Across the hemisphere, uncertainty hangs in the air. Ordinary people watch events unfold with growing concern, unsure of what the future holds for their countries and their families. The world watches closely as the region navigates this new era of great power rivalry, knowing that the choices made here will echo far beyond Latin America's borders. The long-term consequences of the Monroe Doctrine are deeply uncertain, but the risks are profound. Unilateral action and coercion may yield short-term wins, but erode trust and stability, fueling anti-American sentiment. Treating Latin America as a chessboard could drive nations closer to China, undermining U.S. goals. The doctrine's hard power focus threatens the international system the U.S. once championed, normalizing coercion and election interference. Alienating allies in Europe and Canada weakens the coalition needed to uphold a rules-based order. The aggressive revival of the Monroe Doctrine could secure U.S. interests, or trigger a realignment that diminishes American influence. The policy's successes are fragile, its failures costly. The shadow of the Monroe Doctrine has returned, but its final shape remains uncertain.